Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Jonathan Cropper will be doing a presentation on the self-determination of points of connections. The presentation itself should take about probably 40 minutes, but it will be broken up into sections. Now, everyone should be on mute. I would ask if you could remain on mute whilst we're doing the presentations. We will, as I say, break up the presentation to allow for questions as they arise. If you would like to ask a question, you have the chat functionality, which you can type the question in and we'll pick it up at each of the Q&A sections. Or if you'd like to speak and ask the question, if you raise the hand, I'll come to you at the Q&A points. We are recording the webinar, so just if you could be aware of that, the idea is we would like to publish it on the website after the event. So I will now hand over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Hannah. Do I have control now, Hannah?
You should have control. You not got it yet?
Let's see. About any second. Anyway, I'll do the introduction and then we'll see. Yes, thank you for that introduction, Hannah, and thank you to everybody that's joined us this morning. Nice to see you, so to speak. Usually we would try and do these as a face-to-face meeting. We held one of these previously in March. I think the last one was just before lockdown. But quite happy to do these things via WebEx, via the technology that is now available to us. So just to clarify for anybody on the call, just to make sure that you're all here, this presentation is for the self-determination of points of connection. This is there's a separate presentation that we may run in the future for self-determined design approval, but this is for the process for self-determining points of connection to ENW's network. Introductions we've already done. Clearly, this being a WebEx, we don't have to go through the normal housekeeping. And then the agenda is we'll go through what we've done so far, what the prerequisites are for yourselves to determine whether you would like to self-determine your own points of connection. Then we'll have a little run through the process, and I'll show you the document that's available to you to browse at your leisure. Then the second half of the presentation, we'll just go through some of the information that's available to you. So we'll do I'll go into details about the first pass check that ENW will do. I'll show you the network information that's available to you, go through some network integrity checks, and we'll do a very small example of one at that stage. Then we'll go into just some of the standard design matrices, the network policies. And we'll finish up going through some of the resources that are already available to yourselves on our external website. Okay, so what have we done so far? So as you can see, there is a self-determining point of connections user guide on the right-hand side of the screen there. It was actually produced in September 2017 originally. We haven't seen, although it's been reviewed since then, we haven't seen any obvious changes to that guide or the process in that time. So that is the most up-to-date relevant document that we have. What we did prior to that, we looked at doing upfront charging of assessment and design fees. It should be noted at this stage that even though upfront charging of A&D fees are now in place, ENW took the decision to cap that at any request over 1 megawatt. There is currently no plans, although that doesn't say it won't change in the future, but we have no current plans to upfront charge A&D fees for any request for LV HV schemes. As I said, we've also gone through the process in detail, and the user guide is available, and everything's available on our website there. This presentation will be published on the website in the next few days. All these links are relevant, and will take you straight through to the pages that you need in our websites. Okay, so the process itself and the prerequisites. Prerequisites obviously is that any ICP that wishes to do their own self-determined point of connection must have NERS accreditation. The ICP must also be willing to accept any risk of the POC selected, and they must also produce the minimum cost design to their customer. So any POC must involve the minimum cost design in that situation. Like I said, the example below is just an example from the NERS website. You'll all be familiar with that, just showing what accreditation each ICP actually would have. On the right hand side of the page, we've got the self-determined point of connection user guide. Hopefully you can all read that. I'm only joking. We'll go through it in a little bit more detail now. I've got some of the sections blown up so we can walk through the process slowly. If there are any questions as we're going through the process, put your hand up, as Hannah said, and then we'll have a little Q&A session at the end of the process walkthrough, when I can hopefully deal with any questions specific questions you may have. Okay. So process walkthrough, really straightforward. We've just put this into 2 tram lines. Left hand side of the screen is Electricity North West. Right hand side of the screen is the ICP ID. So start of the process is you would complete a notification form. This is a self-determined point of connection notification form. This is you submitting the application to us. This is prior to a formal application notification of the self-determined point of connection. First step in the process, complete the notification form to notify us that you are considering to self-determine your own point of connection on a particular site. On receipt of that, we'll do an acknowledgement. We'll carry out a very quick initial check within 5 days and return that information back to you. You should get the response within 5 days. It's a very straightforward, very small, quick check. We're not going to be going into any grand details at that stage. We're certainly not going to be doing any network assessment or anything like that. We're just going to acknowledge your intentions to potentially self-determine your own point of connection. So once you've received our initial check results back, You'll then obviously have to make the decision. Do you want to progress with your self-determined point of connection? If it's no, then just an application submitted for a POC in exactly the same way as you'll all be familiar with. If the answer is yes, and you do wish to proceed with your own self-determined point of connection, then go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where you will then notify Electricity North West of your decision. You'll complete a network study in line with codes and practices and policies, using the network available network data and user guides that are all available to any ICP that's signed up for them. And you also need to submit a signed R form, an R form being a request to amend the HV. Those are absolutely critical to any new development or change on the network. That needs to be submitted at the earliest opportunity, so that we can understand what people's intentions are and how the network might change well in advance. So you need to submit an R form for an HV point of connection. For an LV point of connection, you just need to submit a point of connection drawing with your own network calculations. And they both need to be sent into the competition in connections mailbox, cic@enw.co.uk, as you would when submitting a design approval request. You need, if it's an LV scheme as well, you need to notify ENW of your demand connection and ensure that the process complies with Code of Practice 226. On receipt of those requests, whether it's an R form or a POC drawing for LV, we will then determine whether a network integrity check is required. If it is, then the request will be sent to the strategic planning team and internal team that do all the network integrity checks on behalf of the business connections team or the connections team within Electricity North West and all ICP requests. If it does require a network integrity check and does require, they aim to complete those checks within 10 working days, and you'll be provided with that response once that check is completed. If there's no network integrity check required, then Electricity North West will acknowledge receipt of the point of connection and will advise that there's no network study check is required, and we'll submit and record a signed ICP IDNO completed R form to those two email addresses, depending on whether it's a north or south scheme, or the location of the site. And then the final part of the process, if to determine, Electricity North West also determines if the point of connection is compliant. If it isn't compliant as a result of the network integrity check, ENW will advise that the self-determined point of connection does not apply. The Electricity North West network study will be completed, and resubmission is required by the ICP. You'll obviously be notified that if the POC is not compliant. If it is compliant, then we'll confirm back to you by email that it is, and we'll submit the record, the signed ICP completed R form again to those two web email addresses, depending on whether it's a north site or a south site. Once the R form has been submitted, you're able then to issue a connection offer to your customer, and you'll notify Electricity North West at that point of your intention to proceed, and you'll email a self-determined point of connection acceptance form into the CIC mailbox. There's a specific form for this. It's just to notify us that it's a self-determined point of connection, and not a regular POC. So at the end of that, then we'll also, once you send in your self-determined point of connection acceptance form, we'll also expect you to submit your design submission pack for approval also. As I said earlier, there is a process where you can self-determine your own approval as well, which is a separate process. Otherwise, you can just follow the usual process and ask us to complete the design approval on your behalf. And that brings us sort of to the end. So, it's fairly straightforward. It's not the best. Usually when we do this presentation, we can have paper copies distributed and everyone can follow the lines left, right, up and down. This is available, like I said, on the website as part of the user guide. Please do look at that at your own leisure. Follow the through. But if there are any immediate questions, I'm happy to take those right now. Hannah, do we have anything?
So, not seeing anything on the chat, and I can't see any hands raised. So I'll just give a minute for people to ask a question if they want to.
Okay.
No. Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Okay, so what will Electricity North West do on receipt of a notification that you intend to proceed with your self-determined point of connection? Well, the request will go through to a Electricity North West design engineer, as it would for any other request for a POC. And the first thing we do is check for whether there's any other points of connection already for this site. It could be that other ICPs are also competing, or we've had a request in from a developer, whatever, for that same POC. So we'd always check for any other applications for the same site. We'd also check for any interactivity within the area. So what other schemes do we have that may be using that same point of connection, or a cable that feeds it, and just to make sure that the capacity that you're asking for is actually available to you from that point of connection. We'd also look at the surrounding network just to confirm whether there's any issues with any heavy loads or what the network looks like in the immediate vicinity of your point of connection request. And then we'd also look to see whether there was any other known issues in that area of the network, whether there was any faults work, anything that may prevent that point of connection being available to yourselves. But it's really important to note at this stage that we do not and will not undertake a full or thorough network study. So we're not giving you the same level of service at that point as we would for a request for a point of connection, because it's assumed that you've already done your own full network study as part of your submission. I guess there's a couple of things to point out here as a result of that. As I said before, we're not charging A&D fees for LV and HV requests at this stage. So what we do charge to include the network study in any POC request is still quite a modest fee for that service. It's worth pointing out, as I said right at the beginning as well, that any risk that is a result of that POC, when we get to the delivery stage and energization stage, is entirely at your own risk. And it's also worthwhile with your insurers just to confirm that your insurance company insurance would cover you for determining your own points of connection or anything resulting in that. So as I said, I think it's just worth pointing out at that stage, that we're not going to be undertaking that thorough network study, and that risk is entirely on your own. Okay, this is just going through some of the network information. So you'll all hopefully be familiar if you've signed up to our secure area of the website. This gives you lots of information about network development proposals, fault level information, load information, transformer information. I won't read them all through. You can see them yourself there. Hopefully you'll all be familiar with this. This is all information that should assist with you determining your own point of connection and give you hopefully the confidence to proceed if that's what you wish to do. Hopefully you're all familiar with this. If you haven't signed up to this website, I think you can contact the ICE team, and they can or there may be a form on the website as well. But either way, you can all access this as long as you're a registered ICP on the NERS database. Okay, so network integrity check. This is the checklist. As I said earlier on in the process, if you submit a request to us, then we will submit an R form, or you submit your LV plans at a very early stage. If you're going ahead with the self-determined point of connection, then it may be subject to a network integrity check. These are just highlighting what those rules are. So basically anything EHV would always be subject to a network integrity check. Any HV submissions over 500 kVA will be subject to a network integrity check. Low voltages, all submissions over 100 kVA will always be subject to a network integrity check. and LV schemes under 100 kVA do not require network integrity check. Okay, this is just going through the standard design matrix at LV. So I mentioned Code of Practice 226 earlier for submissions at LV. This process flow here is a direct lift and shift from Code of Practice 226. So I'd encourage you to look at that if you're not familiar with it already. And the Code of Practice 226 and this matrix is suitable, as it says there, for 3-phase loads up to 60 kVA, single-phase loads up to 20, new loads, motor loads, including, saying there, welding equipment, and other motors, heat pumps, that type of thing. And applies to urban networks only. So if we just go through this, I said I'd do an example. So this is a really quick example of how you would use this process flow. So we take this one. So you've got a connection that's less than 60 kV. There's an LV, it says mass-in, it's not a mass-in, it's a pass-in main, 3-core 300 waveform all the way back to the substation. We've got a distance from the substation is less than 230 meters. The service cable is less than 30 meters. Sufficient spare capacity on the transformer. So if the answer to all those is yes, all the Code of Practice 226 checks have been satisfied. Therefore, the connection can be taken from the passing main without a full network study. So it's a really useful little checklist as part of this process if you're going to determine your own, in this example, LV point of connection. Okay, this is hopefully something again you'll be familiar with. All the network policies are available on our webpage. Gives you access through to the policy library as well. And in the self-determined point of connection user guide on the right hand side, this is a direct lift and shift from there. There's a section on the network policy which highlights which policies may be relevant to you self-determine your own point of connection, and some examples, and say there's an example there below of the relevant policy document. So plenty of information in the user guide. All that information is still relevant. Like I said, even though the user guide itself is now 2 or 3 years old. I also mentioned before that there's a notification form for self-connection. This is right at the beginning of the process, before you've even made the decision to go ahead with a self-determined point of connection. This is a form that you complete and send in to us to notify us of your intention to investigate whether a self-determined point of connection is something you wish to pursue. So there's a specific form for this, and I'll go through all these at the end. This is available on the self-determined point of connection page of our website. Very familiar format to anybody who's completed one of these before, but it's just a notification, kicks off the process. This is just a couple of pages from the R-Form template. The R-Form template itself is also available on our webpage. These 2 pages in particular just give you the just a feel for the calculation sheet on the right-hand side. and also the symbology used as part of our submissions for any R-form request. Hopefully pretty self-explanatory. There's quite a bit to go through. It probably looks more daunting than it potentially is. It depends on the complexity of the scheme itself, but certainly for an HV alteration to any HV system, this form needs to be completed by yourselves and submitted as part of your notification of a self-determined point of connection, that you're wishing to proceed with a self-determined point of connection. I mentioned the symbology on the R form. There's also really good guides on the self-determined point of connection website, page of our website, sorry. There's a booklet that's been produced by our data management team, which explains all the Electricity North West symbology. And there's also a guide for recording underground assets, both of which should be valuable to you. Hopefully you're already familiar with both of these documents for when you're submitting as layouts to us, but just to make you aware that those two documents are available and go into quite some detail, so I'd encourage you to take the time to look at those. Then we're getting on to, if you're going ahead with your self-determined point of connection, this is the acceptance form. As I said before, this form just advises of your intention to self-determine your point of connection, and we'll deal with this in the way I said earlier. We don't do a full network study. But we will record it as a new project reference on our system, and we will do some light checks just to confirm, as I've said before, whether there's any interconnectivity, any known issues on that network. We will do a confirmation of that and report back on that. But this is the form that you use specifically to notify us that you are wishing to proceed with your self-determined point of connection. And again, that is available on the self-determined point of connection page of our website. This just points you to the numbers of resources that are available already on our website. Within there, publish these slides. The slides that are currently on there, I think from probably a year ago when we previous presentation, but as I said, we did deliver this in March this year, and I think we're going to deliver another one in a few months' time. But we'll put the latest slides. I have gone through these. All the links in these slides are up to date and relevant. So if you do open these this presentation, you'll be able to find all the links, which should bring you through, hopefully, to this page anyway. That's the full link if anybody wants to write that down. But on the web page, as I've said, self-determination notification form. There's the two data management guides for our symbology and recording underground assets. There's the R form sheet, which is available, the self-determined connection acceptance form, and a typical low voltage self-determined point of connection drawing as an example. The second link down, the bottom left, there's a training webinar there. That webinar, as you'll see, was uploaded on the 22nd of May in 2018. I urge you to, if you haven't already, to watch that previous webinar, because in there we've got two of our design engineers two experienced design engineers, David Schofield and Sarah Seabrook, that go through a number of HV and LV examples, which goes through their own thought processes when they determine a port of connection. So absolutely invaluable to you. We're not going to remove that and replace it with this webinar. There's some really good information, and we'll also publish these latest slides. But some of you may have attended an overview of our network asset viewer tool that is also now available on our competition and connections website. That is something that a number of ICPs have requested over a number of years. That's finally launched. There was the overview of it a couple of weeks ago. The network asset viewer should also be another tool in your arsenal to determine your own points of connection. So I'd urge you to go on the competition and connections website and take a look at that tool also, in conjunction with all the other information that's available to you. Other than that, I'm going to hand back over to you, Hannah, just to wrap up.
Yes.
I'm still here if there's any questions that come through.
Without further ado, thank you ever so much for joining us, and have a lovely day.